We'd like to start now if we could, because we're running a wee bit behind. So I will get straight to the first speaker at this stage. So I'd like you to welcome Donal Daly, please. He's founder and CEO of the Future Planet. And so Donal, if you're here, please. And he's going to talk about sustainability. Thank you very much, Donal.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Very happy to be here. Learned an awful lot this morning. I used to be an engineer. I qualified 40 years ago. And I've forgotten an awful lot more, and I learned something this morning, so fantastic. So happy to talk about transforming the procurement landscape in the context of the industry that you folks are all experts in. I'm a software guy. I've been a software guy since I started my first AI software company in 1986, when software was cool and AI was cool, and then AI wasn't cool for 30 years, and now it's cool again. It's kind of like my clothes, right? So I had 5 software companies, and I sold my last software company in 2019, and I had stopped what I was doing, and I was sitting at the table at home one day, and my son, that's one on the right there, who hopefully nailed his German exam this morning. So 3 years ago, he said to me, "So, Dad, will the planet still be okay when I'm your age?" And that's a tough question to be asked, and that's a tough question to answer. And the issue that I thought was, damn, I used a different word, but I'll say that one for now. Can I use the experience that I've gained in working with mid to large companies, which is what I've done for 30 years, in AI, and apply AI to help companies on their sustainability journey? And I thought about that, and I went, I can stand, yeah, thanks. Okay. I thought about that, and I said, well, in reality, if we all stop consuming, the world will be fine. But in practice, we're not going to all stop consuming. So maybe we can consume better. Maybe we can consume more responsibly. Maybe I can fix this. So against that landscape, I went, okay, in the corporate world, what does that mean? And consuming means buying better. And that kind of leads me to procurement. But the challenge that we're facing is unquestionably the biggest business challenge, the largest transformation we have to deal with in business. And it's a business transformation. And as I was watching all the processes and structures and procedures that all you guys do in construction, now I'm thinking, and I was speaking to somebody over lunch who was going, oh, maybe this should be the 7D or the 8D. And I learned all sorts of dimensions that I didn't know existed, right? But personally, sustainability maybe should be the first D as we think about it. So as you kind of step through it, I sat on a beach and went, you need to think about this problem. It's a big problem. And I'm sitting there with my co-founder, a lady who got me into this gig today because she's doing a procurement leadership thing with the European community today. But we sat there and we thought about this, and we said, okay, how do we get people to change? And it was interesting listening to Saya's conversation this morning. It was about, she talked about culture change, and fundamentally sustainability is about behavior change and those things. We thought about the amount of information that exists. And there's lots and lots of processes and laws, 2,500 laws and policies that people need to be aware of as they're doing it, right? And as we measure things like our ESG metrics, the processes that we have, there's a lot that we have to learn. So I read all the IPCC reports, right? I'm a nerdy, geeky guy. I read all those. Actually, I thought it was before this morning, right? There's a lot more nerdy, geeky people in the room. But anyway, so I read all the IPCC reports. I read all the ESG documents, and I went, okay, I understand now why large corporations are finding it hard to change. It's hard to understand what to do. So we said, maybe we can structure it in a way that people can think about it and understand it. And we talked about live by design. Live is within our own operations within the four walls of business, the things that we do. We want to practice business ethically. We want to ensure we've got the appropriate people practices, the D&I in place, the fairness, all those things in place, and of course, reduce emissions in our buildings with the technologies that you guys bring. And then when we think about our supply chain, that's our buy piece, we know that the impact of the supply chain can be 5 to 7 times the impact of what we do in our building. And then the design piece is how we think about it for the customers. So live in our building, buy from the supply chain, and sell to our customers. So thinking about it in that channel. And we thought that's fairly simple. When we speak to customers about that today, they go, okay, I get that. And then we go, but sustainability is actually not that simple necessarily. Right? So we looked at what we view to be the 30 most material, what are referred to as materiality impacts against people, planet, and prosperity, right across our live by design dimensions. And the thing about this is when we talk about sustainability in the first case, most people go to 1.4 and 1.5, which is about energy and emissions. And the question we'll ask is, we need to think a little bit more about, well, what about 2.5 waste management? And what about 3.8 circular economy? And there was a session on that yesterday. So how can I reduce my emissions and take care of my people and the planet if I don't have a broader landscape? So when I kind of started my life, right, my software life, it was around AI. And my definition of AI is, can I make it easier for people who are not experts to apply the knowledge of experts, fundamentally? And back when I did this a long time ago, it was about declarative knowledge and about those kind of things. And today it's about discovered knowledge and AI and ML and so on. But can we do that? So we thought about it that way. Because when we go on a sustainability journey, it's a journey. And so we start with what are the material topics. So that means for our business, a business that looks like us, what should we actually care about? Now, for most people in the room, you're going to care about the 4 big ones. You're going to care about energy. You're going to care about water. You're going to care about air. You're going to care about waste. You should be caring about your people and your customers. As you think about it like that, we have a lot of data-driven insight that will say a company of this profile needs to care about these issues. And then you think about how that weights in our industry and so on. When you get to figure out what the topic is, whether it's waste or water or single-use plastic or sustainable procurement, then we've got to figure out where we're starting from. And that's our kind of where we are today piece. Then what's the right target? Where are we getting to? What are the next best steps? Right? And can we bake this into a software platform to make it easy for people to do? So, and then they can go and measure progress. Tracking with me so far? So, GHG emissions, I'm just going to go here for a second, because this is where people mostly go, right? So, people in the room familiar with scope 1, 2, and 3? Anyone? Right, we've got some. Okay, so this is the key measure, this is one of the major measures that most people use when they talk about sustainability and the ESG reports. Scope 1 is what happens in your building, largely. Right? Scope 2 is about the fuels and electricity and things that you buy. And Scope 3 is pretty much everything else. So Scope 3, which is difficult, is your upstream stuff. You will see on the slide things like purchased goods and services, fuel and energy, transportation, waste, business travel. I've got to measure all of these things. And then downstream, when I make my product and it goes out the door, I got to measure my transportation, end-of-life treatment, and various things to get a ESG data report that I need, and by law, increasingly so. Right, 2,500 laws today and growing. So I just wanted to go there. And the key thing in terms of procurement, if I go back to where I started from, responsible consumption is about buying better, and procurement is at the core of all of these items. Now, I'm not going to spend time on this, right? This is like the way it used to be before, let's say, and this is maybe the way it is now. And you guys went through all of this in detail, is that everything matters, right? Everything matters. Our Siemens presentation talked about everything mattering right through the whole process. And you're thinking about that, and I actually don't worry about the things that you're thinking about. I worry about the things that you're not thinking about. So I worry about waste, and I worry about water, and I worry about circular, and I worry about sustainable logistics, and I worry about community engagement, and I worry about those things. So when we think about sustainability in that context, that's the breadth that we're trying to look at. So I'm a software guy. We put together a software platform that does this. And we sat in a room, firstly, or on the beach for 2 years. It was very cold. We were on the beach, and we thought about things, and we got some ideas, and we put it together. And we put together this blueprint. Anyone use Google Maps on the way here today? Right, the most widely used AI platform on the planet. Right, and Google Maps started when they took all the world's atlas that they licensed from TeleAtlas, put it on the platform, and you knew where to go and start. And then over time, as more people used it, it got smarter. Right, so we're thinking about that same kind of blueprint model as we step through it. And we do it by helping people on their materiality assessment, figure out their baseline, go on the sustainability transformation, and then measure things as the outcome on the back of an overall platform around collaboration, ESG frameworks, data, and all the things that you'd expect. So when we bring people on that platform, we're going to bring it through here, and which number on the page is most important? It's going to be number 1, right? So with some data insight, we can tell for a company that looks like you what that needs to be. We can tell how you're doing and where you're starting from today based on where that is. Now, my purpose for Future Planet is to create as much impact as we can in the world to help people on their sustainability journey. It's a behavior change problem. It's really hard, and it's really complicated, right? So as we kind of think about it, as we're trying to step through that, how much knowledge can we bake in when people are doing good work around buildings and doing good work on everything else? Can we bring it together in a business transformation? And then bring all my team on board. Anyone familiar with software development goals? Sustainable development goals? SDGs, right? So those colored boxes on the top left, right? So our software will know about the sustainable development goals. It'll know about the GRI indicators. It'll know about SASB. It'll know about GRESB. It'll know about TCFD. These are all acronyms that go in the sustainability phrase when I need to go and create my report. So we do this, bring the team on board, and bring people through that. We try and do it in teams. People start in different places, and it's really important that we think about kind of, some people will say, I need to do net zero. So we kind of bring people through that journey. Some people want to do strategy. Some companies, I kind of think about companies like construction and manufacturing, which I refer to as dirty in a good way, right? And there's lots of carbon to be dealt with. I think about companies like software companies and big professional services companies, and they're cleaner, if I call it that. They care more about the social issues because they don't get the people and do the DEI, and so they don't have to care so much about the other things. We think about that, and then as companies extend and grow, they think about a sustainable supply chain because I can have a lot of impact, and the full ecosystem as the biodiversity piece plays. Some of you will have seen earlier this week, I think, a bill put together in Europe about protecting biodiversity across Europe, which is a good thing for us all to care about. So as you kind of step through it, I thought about this. So if I was putting together construction essentials, what would I do? Right? I care about energy management. That energy and a little bit on the right is my GHG emissions, which is largely a consequence of that plus the other things. Water, waste. I mean, we probably know in various parts of the world there is severe water shortage, severe stress in water. Southeast England right now is worse than sub-Saharan Africa because it's a waste, it's a usage availability issue. You guys will know, 30% of materials in construction end up in waste, right? It's something we can manage. And my little icon top right of that is circular. Right, so can I think from the start how I design all this stuff out on the way in? Sustainable procurement, I can buy better. And the funny thing is, when people say, where should we start? And generally speaking, whatever the industry is, if you're spending a chunk of money somewhere, we'll say start with sustainable procurement for 2 reasons. One is, it's the right thing to do, right? Because you can buy from suppliers who aren't killing people, who aren't using forced labor, who aren't doing all those kind of things, which is a good thing to do. But typically, when you look at any process, you end up with better procurement practices, which saves you money, which funds some of the other projects, which is part of the challenge on this. And then the last one, I use DEI as an example of business ethics and good practice, because if we think about it, climate injustice is the greatest injustice that we have. And if we make fairer decisions, and typically if women are making decisions, they're better decisions than if men are making decisions, just by the way, right, as we know, right? And if we think about that, then we can help people on the process. Last thing I want to say, I saw coming to this that delighted to see CISC was a sponsor. And about a year ago, CISC called us and said, we've got a single-use plastic challenge we want to improve. Can you help us? We go, we can. Our software isn't finished yet. Right? And they go, OK. So here's the journey that we're going on. And in about, CISC have been on sustainability journey for about 10 years or more now. Right? And that's their journey plan that they have, and they have published, and that's all available. And they have 21 targets that they manage. And we were delighted. We started working with them in September on their sustainability journey. And instead of doing a 6-week consulting exercise, our software helps you get on the journey in about 2 hours. Right? They did that, and then they did an ISO 20400 sustainable procurement journey, and then waste, and then water, and then circular. And it's been a really great story. And the reason it's been a good story, actually, they would classify it as what this is internal CISC slide, which I'm allowed to show. Right? They'll talk about the ROI, about people, ROI about reputation, ROI about business continuity. And I was speaking to one of the CISC folks this morning, and he said, are you working with Sinead? I said, yes. And he said, she's on maternity leave. And I said, I know. Right? And I said, but she said, I don't care because the system knows what the team is supposed to do. So that helps with that process. And it does because of embedded knowledge and various things that we do. And Sinead's amazing, as is her 6-month-old new child, or 3-month-old new child. So thank you for that. If you want to get some stuff today for your personal usage, there's a free app you can do. You can download it today at futureplanet.com/app. Personal carbon footprint, do your own stuff. It's a good thing. I met Mary Donnelly, the chairperson of the Climate Change Action Committee, about a year ago. She said, we need one for Ireland, will you build it? I said, I will. So it's there, and we've had a few thousand folks have used it. So it's there to use. Please use it. If you learn and you make a change, that's a good thing. The second thing you might want to do, if you think about it in your enterprise, or looking at it, or how you're going on sustainability, you can go and, I should have a link here, I don't, but you can email me for that, things you should think about on your sustainability journey. And I think we're back on time. Mary, thank you.
Thank you very much, Donal. There is one common thread to all the presentations here today, and that is it's been either spoken directly or indirectly. Directly is in the case of Donal and CitA, or indirectly is in the case of all the other speakers, because they've all alluded to it in one way or another, and that is culture change. So we can call that the silver thread because we already have a golden thread, but we really need culture change. If we get culture change, we get the changes we need. Until a culture changes, it's very hard to get the changes we need. Our next speaker is Matthew Egan, and Matthew is going to present on the practicalities of designing for modular manufacturing procurement. Matthew?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Well, hello, and thank you all for attending today, and thank you to CitA for inviting me. I hope that I can make this presentation both interesting and informative for everyone. Let me just see if that works. My name is Matthew Egan, and I'm founder and MD of a company called Modularize. Modularize was established 11 years ago to bridge the gap between manufacturing and construction. So in that time, we've had a great privilege of working on some of the most groundbreaking MMC projects around the world, designing lightweight modules for transport from Peru into the Amazon by helicopter, lightweight structures that we transported around India on the back of a bike. Well, we've worked on a lot of the UK's leading MMC residential systems. So Modularize is basically a multidisciplinary practice consisting of architects, engineers, MMC consultants, and we also have computer programmers or coders. And we've evolved this way to directly face up to the issues and the common problems that we encounter in MMC projects. On the agenda today for this short presentation is what's on screen now. I'm going to talk a bit about how early engagement is important in procuring the right modular solution. why standardization and digital design are becoming really important levers in the sector, and how you can identify a partner to mitigate risk in your supply chain and improve outcomes. At Modularize, we live and breathe collaboration, and that overarches everything we do. So I'll bust a myth or two for you with a couple of examples of projects we worked on. And finally, I'll talk about what we should be doing and thinking when procuring for value in off-site construction. So early engagement is absolutely vital to the success of any MMC project. This graphic is a report from a report called Making Modular Stack Up, and it illustrates the breakdown of the proportion of time spent on different MMC projects compared to, or different MMC types compared to conventional or traditional construction. The main points that I'm going to draw your attention to are that the more you do offsite, the more design and approvals are required. So you can see the volumetric at the bottom has got the biggest light blue part of the diagram. And what this essentially equates to is on the right-hand side of the diagram, less time on site. This blue part, this light blue part on the left, I'm going to refer to as the pre-construction overhead, or the pre-con overhead. And the benefits of the pre-con overhead obviously emerge on the right. And these kind of green bits are what's being done in the factory and generally happen in the same time that foundations are being built on site. The RIBA DFMA overlay aligns all the relevant tasks that must be actioned at each project stage to successfully deploy DFMA into a project. So offsite, we say it is an MMC, it is not a product, it's a process. And it's important that an MMC specialist or an MMC consultant is engaged at the early stage in RIBA stage 0 to ensure that the right form of MMC is applied as early as possible to maximize the strength, to maximize the return to the stakeholders and the value within the team. And Modularize, we see far too many projects come across our desk with detailed planning already approved. And at that stage, it's really hard to make any form of MMC work since there are so many considerations that need to be made and managed. And this often means that the project needs to be resubmitted for planning if it's already got planning. And clients often don't want to take that risk of resubmitting something into planning. So RIBA stage 0, really important to incorporate an MMC consultant at the start to determine not only if offsite construction is viable, but also which form of offsite construction is best suited to that project. And you'll hear me talk about MMC and offsite construction, kind of interchangeable terms really. And there are many terms we use for producing elements of a building essentially offsite in a factory away from the site and then bringing them to site. There are also just as many ways of categorizing these systems, but just in general, I'll kind of briefly run over what the main categories as I kind of see them. We've essentially got open panel systems, which is generally just the structural frame, whether that's steel or timber. Closed panel systems, boarded on both sides. You can have some open panel systems that are boarded on one side. And generally, when you get kind of put down to the closed panel systems, they're starting to incorporate things like windows and cladding already on them. A volumetric system is the 3D element, so that's basically everything in the box, including finishes internally, often cladding on it as well. Hybrid systems will be something akin to a bathroom pod with some of the panelized systems incorporated into it as well, so pod and panel system. And sub-assemblies, you see often see pre-assembled roof trusses, for example, going down the motorway, or pre-assembled door sets used commonly in construction these days, certainly in factory production. And then components, you've got things like plug-and-play electrical systems. Today, just to kind of focus your mind, we're specifically focusing on the modular volumetric systems. Now, within that modular volumetric kind of category of MMC, it's important to understand that there are huge differences between individual organizations that operate as manufacturers within that product category. Some of them tend to standardize their product range more. So on the left, you've got kind of the analogy to the Ford Model T, which is, you have any Ford Model T as long as it's black, and a Model T. So we've got this standardized kind of business model, if you like, all the way through to a more customizable, more bespoke business model. And I mean, this is just kind of it's not accurate where I place these companies by any stretch of the imagination. It's just to kind of illustrate that point that, Ilka Homes, for example, standard house types, whereas ESS, MAR, they'll be more flexible in terms of their offering, but they will still have a standard system or try to use a standard system. Very little standardization at a national level when it comes to MMC or off-site construction. And systems are often developed to meet various sector and manufacturing capabilities, using e-tags or building regulations as kind of a loose set of guidance. As a result of a kind of international push at ISO level, BSI have launched the CB 301 Offsite and Modern Methods of Construction Committee, which I'm privileged and honoured to be chair of. The committee had its first meeting last week, and we've started by aiming to standardise terminology, and then as we focus our scope, we'll be looking at things like interfaces, tolerances, and importantly, the control of data as well. Another committee that I'm chair of is the technical work stream with the Offsite Alliance. And this is a particular interest to me because it's really started to see collaboration across the industry. In particular, the fire element of that work stream has started to look at how we can kind of share data on fire test build-ups, create a matrix and basically share best practice and identify where there's any gaps in the kind of knowledge. As the wave of standardization starts to shape our sector, we'll start to see these systems start to converge. So I spoke about different setups of different modular manufacturing companies in terms of the flexibility earlier. So you've got the standardized kind of approach all the way to the kind of bespoke model. And even within, those modular manufacturers, we still see different materials, different systems. So on the left there, you've got a house that's designed using cross-laminated timber. It's a modular system using cross-laminated timber. And then on the right, there's a steel frame modular building system. Manufacturers have their own specific system details, and these details are approved by insurers and backed up with test data, so that each manufacturer has effectively got their own product, their own intellectual property. This is obviously very appealing to their investors, helps them differentiate in the market, but it does nothing to help us understand the best way to procure them. Even on a singular level, modular volumetric, even in the steel frame modular volumetric sector, everybody is kind of doing it differently. Now, I don't generally like to make comparisons to the automotive sector, but when it comes to MMC, let's face it, that there's quite a lot to learn. Take, for example, the model of platform sharing. So, the Volkswagen Golf, for example, shares a platform with the Audi A3. Different cars, but the same starting point. By sharing platforms, manufacturers can start to standardize various elements of the design and work with the supply chain to optimize performance, delivery, as well as start to leverage and benefit from economies of scale. And there is a term used in the automotive sector called body in white. So this refers to kind of what you're seeing on the left there, the frame before, or the platform before it's painted, before the engine's fitted, before there's any trim or any sub-assemblies fixed to it. So imagine if we could get to a box in white in modular construction, if we could somehow standardize across the steel frame modular building sector, and we start to see some uniformity that would help architects to specify, developers to procure more modular buildings more efficiently with a known starting point, just bolting on different specifications from the box in white. And we see in the automotive sector, again, how this kind of front end to back end platform manufacturing kind of works in the automotive sector. So product configurators, for example, the kind of slick pieces of online code that allow configurations to be made and priced really rapidly. This gives the customer the illusion that they effectively designing their own product when in actual fact, all they have is more choices, less choice. Without this front end to back end realization in the modular construction sector, the pre-con overhead, if you remember me talking about that in the first or second slide, the pre-con overhead is higher, and it kind of makes it, you know, without that level of standardization and that kind of flow from front to back end, the pre-con overhead is somewhat necessary and kind of distorts the cost that we're seeing in the market at the moment. There are tons and tons of digital tools and great pieces of software on the market, and these are going to help us get there. I'd say there's a bit of disparity at the moment in the market, which seems to be getting better about architectural solutions and how they link up with manufacturing solutions. The example on screen is a module that's been built to kind of optimize or minimize the number of board cuts, you know, to kind of optimize that for production for DFMA. And the output, essentially, aside from the drawings, is a fully detailed manufacturing bill of materials. And with this bill of materials, we can go very well armed to each of the module manufacturers within our targeted supply chain, and not just target that pre-con overhead that I mentioned earlier, but we can also, via standardization, start to target the procurement overhead in terms of the materials costs, the labor breakdown, and then try to work together with the module manufacturer to reduce the cost of the product as much as possible. We see often, you know, suppliers pricing in, for example, risk to the module manufacturer because they perceive it's quite a risky market. So material suppliers will price in risk. We've kind of mitigated that in the past by having the developer procure the materials and pre-issue them to the manufacturer, and then therefore save something like, you know, 5-10% on material cost. With all of these things start to stack up. Additionally, if we're kind of producing this level of information and this level of detail, you know, we can link that bill of materials to systems like ERP, product lifecycle management to help manage iterations or product data management. I'm sure this saying was around a long time before this guy said it in the financial sector, but it does echo into everything really. You know, if a module manufacturer goes bust, for example, midway through production, then you might find yourself left holding stock that nobody else will complete. When we see this happen far too often in the sector, and as I've illustrated to you earlier, even that steel frame modular building sector, which is a very specific subset of the overall MMC sector, you know, they've still got their own different systems. So because there's very little standardization, with very little opportunity to mitigate the risk should one module manufacturer go pop and you have to move your stock from another manufacturer to another. And I know there's all kinds of financial mechanisms and safeguards you can put in place, but we shouldn't avoid looking at, you know, the actual loss of materials and labor in that situation. The first modular project I ever worked on was called Allenby Connaught. And this was a £1.45 billion project to produce one building every week for 8 years. And you can see from kind of the image that I've got up there, it was a very cookie cutter approach. All of these buildings are a single living accommodation for the MOD. And what the MOD realized was this risk, this eggs in one basket risk. So they mitigated that by having two manufacturers roll along and Tata Solutions and split the production about 80-20, and then effectively use the third-party product. So you know, somebody else designed the product for the two factories to produce. Now, you'll remember that I said that each module manufacturer has their own system, and I'm certain their investors see this as a value. They see it as IP. But let me tell you, there's no IP in assembling steel boxes. The very fact that every manufacturer has their own system actually alienates their market. Insurers, banks, lenders receive the eggs in one basket risk and price it into the cost of lending. So suppliers of materials, as I've said earlier, will actually also price this risk in. Collaboration is really key, and sharing of data, sharing of system details, and a push forward for standardization will help clients procure modular with much more certainty and a lower cost. A method of helping us to understand the value of offsite systems in relation to the project cost is a measure known as pre-manufactured value. Now, with thanks to our friends at Akerlof, I've pinched this graphic. It's quite good at demonstrating the basic concept of PMV, which is basically the more you do offsite, the higher proportional score you get. I'm not sure if this actually helps us to make procurement decisions, and in as much as it might help us benchmark different forms of MMC against each other. A better consideration needs to be made on a project-by-project basis at REBA stage 0. So the aims of each stakeholder within the project need to be understood. The manufacturing supply chain needs to be involved, or at least understood, so that any decisions made come with risk mitigation built in at the start from the early stages. Each project we work on is completely different, not just because of the size, shape, or purpose of the buildings and the values and constraints we need to work within. Take the project on the bottom right. It's a project called Das Boulder, which is manufactured by a Dutch shipping company. It's actually the company, I can't say the name, but it's a company that raised the Kursk submarine. And the year after they raised the Kursk submarine, they decided to build their own office. They used the premises that they've got. They designed it themselves, and they designed it to be floated down a river so that the height of it was restricted and designed by the height that it could pass under this bridge at low tide. So they had the facilities, they had the expertise and knowledge in-house to make this a success, and designed it for their own kind of values and capabilities. Citizen M hotel units on the bottom left there. You know, the hotel manufacturer, this is a self-contained hotel unit, which is in one module. And it's full of tech, full of cool gadgets that you can kind of log on to when you get in there. But that's sent to site, bolted together with modular units. And, you know, Citizen M use that method of procurement and delivery because they want to finish the hotel fast, they want to start generating revenues, and they want to offload their finance as quickly as possible. Centrepoint in the middle at the bottom is accommodation for homeless people, and that was designed to fit the planning constraints. So even going back to the different manufacturing systems that I was talking about earlier, and the different module manufacturers, you know, sometimes they have to be tweaked to meet things like the footprint or the build height that's set by the planning conditions. Modules may be an efficient way to, you know, that's that one in the middle, the one where the modules are stacked in a different way than you might ordinarily be used to seeing. Rather than the modules being designed and planned, they're designed over 3 stories. In that instance, it was more economical and more valuable based on the transport restrictions to design the building in that way and deliver it in that way. Panelized systems, the one on the top left and the top right, designed for difficult site access. So, you know, delivering a panelized system is a lot lighter, takes up a lot less footprint than a modular system. We've talked about supply chain, and we should not just be thinking about the module manufacturing that supply chain. There are a number of component and sub-assembly manufacturers that can be brought to the party very early and add great value to the procurement process. These are just 2 examples where we've got a pre-assembled M&E, so standardized, pre-assembled, pre-tested kind of carcass that's got all the M&E in it. That's sent to the modular manufacturer's factory to be assembled really quickly into the module. And then we've got thermoscale on the right, which, you know, that kind of removes the need for a complicated underfloor heating, but delivers the same effect. There are literally hundreds of solutions like these, and you shouldn't think that your module manufacturer already knows or uses them. If you want to procure modular buildings at the best price, then it's up to you to streamline the manufacturing process from the onset. So just finally, to summarize, you need to engage early an MMC consultant that will solve your procurement nightmares and mitigate risks. Identify your supply chain as early as possible and understand their capability in terms of customization and the materials that they use. What does this mean to your project? Planning sub-assemblies and components into the design that can help streamline the procurement of the manufacturer and also streamline the manufacturing process as it's going through the factory. And finally, procure for real value, not just a measure of what's being done off-site and on-site. So thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, then I'll leave my details on the screen.
Thank you very much, Matthew. We'll keep the questions and answers till at the very, very end, if that's okay.
Okay.
You did make a very good point, and it is to standardise definitions, which is essential if we're to have full collaboration, so we're all speaking the same language, and that avoids confusion and misinformation. So, yes, we do need to standardise a lot of things. Our next speaker is Andrew Bellerby, and he's Managing Director of Celebri. And Andrew is going to talk about the world's most valuable commodity, which is data. Thank you.
Hi. Watch my presentation comes up. There we go. Good afternoon. My name's Andrew Bellerby. Just going to talk a little bit about the importance of quality throughout that design process and into construction, and how perhaps that can be automated using technology. And there's been a lot of talk about the cultural changes that need to happen for that as well, and that's a key part of it. So a little bit about Celebri. We're a Finnish company. We actually started probably about 25 years ago. And originally we were more a services company offering material takeoff, information takeoff, quality services. And very quickly realised that you can't get quantities very well unless you've got validated data. And that was when the software actually started being developed. And the reason why we're here today as well. We're part of the Nemetschek brand, perhaps not so well known in the AC industry, but a big software house that has perhaps some brands you do know, such as Celebri, Graphisoft, Vectorworks, Bluebeam are ones that you may know. But the Nemetschek name itself isn't as well known, so we're trying to promote that a little bit as well. Okay, so why BIM quality assurance, and especially why now? Why does it matter? Certainly from a UK point of view, there's recently been the draft, the Building Safety Bill published, which has made a lot of companies sit up and look and think, how do we deliver this? The golden thread of information, again, is something else that people need to consider. So what does that do? It really brings transparency about who's responsible for the data. So, you know, who designed it, who manufactured it, who installed it, who maintained it. So all the way through that design to build to operations processes, there is a need to have transparency and responsibility. If something goes wrong with it, whose fault is it? Who do the government go after if there is an issue? So people have got to take this maintenance of data and storing that, but also the validation of it very seriously going forward. So I think when you look at BIM and quality assurance as a part of that, then everybody's kind of looked at the time, the money, and the scope of that. But perhaps more important as well, CSR policies, CO2, that's all part of it. The less waste, then that reduces the carbon footprint, it saves time on site. So it's important that we can really get those models right, digital models right early on, and the data within them, whether that's graphical data, whether it's attributed data, you need to spend time thinking about how do you make sure that is correct. Otherwise, your money goes down the drain. But not only that, your reputation goes down the drain as well, your brand. I remember when I started out, I actually started as a trainee draftsman on the drawing board many, many years ago. And I remember the head draftsman telling me at the time, the drawings that go out the door are our brand. That's what matters. And it's the same with the digital model. The quality of your digital models matter, especially as that data within them gets used for far more activities later on in the process now. When you look at what's in a digital model, then it is really a collection of data, say whether that's geometric shapes, spaces, components, families, relationships between objects, different classifications, constraints, metadata, and much more. The amount that's going into models seems to be certainly growing, and the responsibilities for people to add that information is changing. But all that information has got to conform to standards, be that industry, company standards, country standards, different project standards, as we've heard earlier, different protocols, building regulations, building codes, best practice. There's a lot that you have to think about when you're putting your models together now. But just how do you check all of that? That's really tough. There's certain things that you can do quite easily, but there's a lot of things that make it harder. So we're going to try and cover some of that today. So our first conversation, typically when we go and see potential customers, is, well, what is BIM quality assurance? Clash detection, we do that. We're already doing that. So how can you help us? And we really talk about why it is different. So clash detection is one small part of what I would term as model checking or BIM quality assurance. Said before, data validation is certainly something that our customers are getting more and more interested in. They know that they've got to produce data and add it into the models, but they also know they've got to provide validated data, perhaps more important. How do you check items that don't physically clash? That's a little bit harder unless you can do it visually. How do you check deficiencies in the model? What's missing from the model? What about compliance with building codes? Now, checking building codes to some extent is fine if you've got a clear yes/no answer. A lot of the building codes are open to interpretation. That's harder to check, but at least if you can cover some of that, then that helps. What about fire safety? What about carbon? All those things. Is my design compliant? So you could have the best looking model there is, it might be clash free, but is it compliant? Is the data within it validated? So you can't really use that data to make decisions reliably unless you know that you have checked it. So what we do is we don't author models, we take information from authored models. We run our checks, and then once that's done, we know that that data can be utilised for procurement, scheduling, cost estimation, all the things that will matter later on, even into operations, so that you can make decisions based on valid information. And that's a key thing. We work around open standards, so we're not reliant on any, we like to talk to all the software vendors. We've always done it that way. So IFC is our weapon of choice for our models, and everything that we do is with, in terms of managing the issues that are raised, is with BCF, so another open standard. So quality assurance in design, we'll look at the different stages of the process now. So first of all, looking at design. So we talked about clash detection. Clash detection's been around 20 odd years, possibly longer now. We still get issues on site, but and most softwares do that. So yes, that's an important part. I think the least a client can expect is a clash-free design. But perhaps what about things that I mentioned earlier? What about things that don't clash? So in this example, we've got a smoke exhaust vent. It's located at the emergency route, but it's too close to the stairs. So that wouldn't be picked up typically with a clash detection process, perhaps in the design coordination, but it's not as easy to find. It's not as easy to see that. So these are the sort of things that you're looking for. In this example, perhaps more checking for structural integrity. So the opening for the grille is not exceeding the required distances from the edges of the load-bearing wall, but its openings are not within the acceptable limits. So again, you might pick that up in an earlier process when you're doing your structural designs. You might not, but why risk missing things like that as well? The way Bellerby works is we have around 50 to 60 different rule sets which can be configured, can be combined to allow you to come up with different outcomes to problems that you can hopefully logically describe and then provide an answer to. So this one is actually looking for obstructions that are in front of doors. So again, not things that are clashing, but can I open this door without hitting anything? And you'd be surprised how many times we get lights or suspended ceilings in front of doors or some other obstruction. Missing components. I talked about checking about deficiencies in model. So again, not something you typically check for. Does it matter? It might do if you've got a room equipment list that you need to provide. So we have some rules that we'll also check in this example. It's looking at 3 waiting rooms, or consulting rooms, should I say, in a hospital. They're all expected to have the same equipment in, but one of the rooms has a chair missing. So we highlight that. Not a major issue. You can bring a chair from another room, but if it was something more important, then that is critical, or it could be critical. And it can, of course, affect pricing, procurement, as I mentioned earlier. Perhaps more important when you talk about accessibility and you're thinking about things like people's lives and making their life easier, then this is a rule that's quite a nice one, which we'll check for, in this example, is the space to turn a wheelchair around in this disabled toilet. So we can run a rule that checks, and you can see from the bottom right, a violation there with the red circle, which is what we're getting at the moment, which hits the walls, hits the sink, which is projected down onto the floor. So again, checking for building code violations really with these sorts of things. Something that's becoming more and more important is fire safety. So we've developed a series of rules. We've always had some checks that will look for things like fire compartments and the viability of them, looking at have we got the right number of sprinklers in the building for the area that's there. But this is a new set of rules that we've actually developed recently in conjunction with a number of the large contractors over in the UK, just looking at fire stopping. I never realised it was so complex to do a fire stop. It's just a hole in a wall with a bit of fire protection, isn't it? Well, actually, no, it's not. It's actually quite difficult. So the different number of pipes that go through the fire seal, the diameters, what are they carrying in the pipes, the type of material, all comes into some quite complex calculations. So we've developed some rules that, first of all, identify the fire stops. Is there a fire stop within the hole in the wall, and then the distance from the pipes to the edge of the wall? And just talking with the some of the contractors, it's going to save them a huge amount of time, a huge amount of money, being able to really get a grip on this process. Typically, it's outsourced to experts, but this allows them to do a lot more in-house before they perhaps then go to the experts for sign-off. And especially when it comes to the golden thread, then this is a key part of what they've got to deliver for that. I mentioned the compartmentation already, so that's a simple check for is everything in that compartment when it needs to come to the fire safety. But egress is just as important. What's the shortest route to the nearest fire exit, and is that within the regulations? And you can look at different scenarios for that. Becomes a little bit more complicated when you've got open plan offices and furniture around, but in general, there's a rule there that will work out the nearest escape routes and how far they are away. We've been working recently over the last couple of years on funded projects with something called the DCOM network, Digital Compliance Network, and this has been really looking into, can we automate building control checks? So we did initial studies, and then we're working on at the moment a proof of concept. So can we automate parts of that building code process approval? So we're focused on some of the fire aspects and that side of things, which are really important at the moment. And we've actually come up with a couple of rules as part of this that are automatically checked. So they're submitted via a portal from the company that needs to get the approvals. They then pass it to a server. The building codes are automatically turned into a machine readable format. That's fed into the rules, and the checks are done, and then the results return. So we've managed to automate actually what is quite a complex project. And it was interesting sort of hearing some of the comments this morning, the presentation this morning about those building codes and issues there. So we're trying to solve some of those. As I said before, there is an issue with a lot of the building codes that they're quite grey rather than black and white. So for example, if I needed to check the width of a corridor in a hospital for compliance, then where do you measure from? Is it wall to wall? Is it skirting board to skirting board? And actually, if you ask two building control officers, they'll both give you a different answer. So for a computer, for a machine to be able to check these results, there needs to be a lot more clarity in terms of how the building codes work and which ones can be checked automatically, which ones need interventions from people. But it's some similar work that we've been doing in Singapore for a number of years. I think BCA was touched on this morning, where they're trying to automate all of their planning and building code checks. That's a project that's been going on a number of years and continuing. We're starting to work with some of the councils and departments. MOJ is one, Department for Education, are starting to look at, okay, on all our projects, then we need to know it's compliant. So why not get our designers, our constructors, to start looking at these, how they can automate those checks and de-risk it. But some new rules that we've developed as part of this project, a door leading edge check, and quite an interesting one is the stud opening rule. So in a typical BIM model, the studs aren't often modelled. So what we've done is we've actually created a rule that temporarily builds the studs in that will go around a door frame, and then we'll check for the clashes for any services running above the doors and report back on them. And then obviously the temporary modelling of those items is taken back out of the model. So it's actually adding things to the model, doing the check and removing them in quite a smart way. So little things like this are really starting to help. Now, obviously, it starts in design, and often when you talk to people in design, they say, "Oh, it's not my job to do this." But BIM has changed a lot of people's roles and what they have to do. I'm sure you guys in the room will know that you're being asked to do more, and that also happens throughout the process. So when we move into manufacturing, we don't have many examples of the model checks at this level. They're often done with the authoring software, but quite a nice example. Langer Oaks are doing some quite complex checks for their precast concrete elements in terms of do they pass the size guidance for the machines that they're being manufactured by? Have they got the correct openings for the fixers? Have they got the fixers? And some quite nice checks for that. So they do a lot of that before they go to manufacturing. You can imagine if they've got precast concrete panel wrong, it's delivered to site, then actually that's going to take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of money to replace. So it's key for them that they get it right first time. So why should that be any different to that design process as well? And then when you look at construction, so it's usually too late when you've got to the construction site to actually start thinking about, well, how do we fix the models? It's too late. But the information that's in the model can be used intelligently on the construction site. Concrete volumes by grade, by type, easy to visualize them. And accurate quantities can be pulled to the construction site when needed so that you haven't got extra material sat around on site. And I know that one of our customers is actually modelling where they store the material on site. I think that was touched on this morning as well. Just, you know, it actually takes quite a bit of time on the construction site for people to find the right materials because they don't know where they are, especially if it's a big construction site. So we see that sort of thing as well. Now, something, I talked about some of the Nemetschek brands and a new company that we've invested in, Immerso, is actually quite a nice solution. So does the design match the as-built? And you know, I think there's a few examples of that already today. But they upload the BIM model into the cloud. They upload a point cloud into the cloud as well, and then do a comparison of the two in quite a nice way. They check the results. So are the parts within tolerance? Are they even there with the as-built to the design? Or are there deviations in a slab or a wall? And it'll do some quite nice checks on that. If the deviation is unacceptable, then they can generate a BCF file. Again, open standards to push that information for rework. If it's acceptable, then they can update the IFC file and push that back to the authoring tools or to Celebri, and we can rerun those rules to check, is the as-built compliant as well as the design? So quite a nice workflow there. And of course, at the end of the day, the data is all going into operations asset management. So validated data is better and informed decisions. So classifications, you can classify the models in any way you want, and that's something that we see a lot of people doing with MEP systems, Uniclass, or just splitting down different grades of material, different types of material. However you want to classify the model, you can visualize it, you can report on it. So that could be space usage, room type and count, floor area, volumes, and you can do intelligent checks on the types of rooms as well. Handover, COBie. Is it enough to generate COBie or other digital deliverables without first of all validating the content? And I'll give an example of that later on. But we have quite a nice visual COBie tool that allows you to generate not only the information, but it's a bi-directional link with the model. So you can query and interrogate your COBie outputs and visualize that at the same time. But as I said before, you can't use information until you've checked that information, at least not reliably. So quality data, it starts with you. It starts in that design process. It carries on through the construction process into handover. Some of the arguments we hear, we check our models, we do design coordination. I said before, clash detection has been around a long time. Okay, design coordination goes a little bit further, but there's still so many problems that end up on the site, whether it's the wrong material, whether it's issues, whether it's compliance issues. But the cultural change is the big thing here. So it's not our job. We'll do it when we're told we have to do it. Why? Why do you have to be told to put quality into your own work? Pride in your work, it should be a prerequisite. And it's actually really interesting when you're talking to people and you talk about the quality of models, and they'll say, well, look at this model, it's fantastic. And yes, it looks amazing. We've never had one model yet that we haven't found errors with. And if you criticize people's models, they don't like it, I can tell you that. Yeah, the impressive visuals always mask a multitude of errors, and we can often find them for you. And you can see with quality, I can't spell it either, so I should check my PowerPoint presentations before I do them. I'm sure somebody would have noticed that before I did. But we had, one of our information management customers, they were asked to do an audit of what was supposed to be a complete COBie deliverable, handover. And when they did the audit on it, they found more than 2,000 errors, which is crazy. That just shouldn't happen. So why should you do these quality checks? There's so many different reasons, whether it's just looking after your own brand, whether it's to save money, whether it's just doing the right thing. There's so many reasons to introduce quality into your workflows, and it's not as difficult as you might think. There are ways of automating all of this now. So I'm going to leave you with that quote. It was actually, when I did a search on this one comes up from Benjamin Franklin, but the same quote came from about 5 other people, so I don't know who said it originally, but it's still valid. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low prices are forgotten. And yes, adding quality to the process does bring extra costs, but it also saves money. It saves materials, it saves time. It's just the right thing to do. Okay, that's me done. I've actually got to this top line, so we'll be here for questions.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very, very much. Andrew. I'm conscious of time, so we're running a wee bit behind. So I'll move on to our next speaker, which is Dr. Houssem Jerbi, and he's going to speak on AI. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, nice to be here again at CitA conference. My name is Houssem Jerbi and I am from Smart PMO, which is an artificial intelligence firm based here in Dublin, but we have global operations working with clients in 3 continents currently. So we specialize in building advanced AI solutions that use AI and data science basically to de-risk capital projects throughout their life cycle. We are a team of AI experts, data scientists, and industry subject matter experts, construction engineers, and we are on this mission. So we started this company back in 2017 to solve the problem of productivity, which has been perceived as inevitable in the construction industry. So productivity issues, as everyone I guess know, are due to different factors, ranging from increased project complexity that will make it hard to keep project in time within budget, inadequate risk management, especially the current QSRA methods for risk assessment, project team changes, and the knowledge we lose when we have new projects working on new team working on new projects, and team changes. And these different problems will impact the project from the early stage through the planning phase, procurement, etc. But for this presentation, I'm going to focus on procurement and planning. So we believe at Smart PMO that the construction procurement dynamics need to change. Currently, we have the contractor who is trying to, aiming to build a competitive tender, and he will be trying to generate a project schedule for the customer under different uncertainties. So there are multiple variables and lots of uncertainties that makes the scheduling exercise driven by guesswork and by optimism bias. And on the other side, we have the client who is at the challenging situation because he needs to get the work done in the best way. But given the current methods, most of the clients will go for the lowest cost contract. And we all know that the cheapest contract doesn't mean always a successful delivery of the project. So we think these dynamics need to change in order to shift for a situation where the contractor can take out some of these uncertainties by knowing, for example, with more confidence, the areas of the project that are at risk and define a mitigation strategy for these risks. And then also increase the, be more competitive and be able to generate a more, a better commercial offer to their clients and differentiate themselves from the other contractors. And on the other side, the client obviously wants to maximize the contract certainty, and that could be through unbiased data-driven assessment of the construction programs and cost estimates they are receiving at the tender stage. So to solve this problem, we are building an AI technology that learn lessons from completed projects, create what we call a corporate intelligence memory based on the learnings from the completed projects, and then provide assurance and predictive power for new projects throughout their life cycle. So this is, in a nutshell, how it works. Both clients and contractors will be using different software for scheduling and cost. And we have created internal systems that can connect to this software and integrate data, essentially schedule and cost data, And then this data will be analyzed by our AI algorithms that will learn from these past projects data and then use these learnings for a new project to provide outcome predictions, identifications of risks, and recommendations to mitigate these risks, and essentially risks around schedule and cost. So the platform provides value for projects from the early stage planning throughout execution and post-construction, and it provides insights for both the executive management and the project teams. And depending on the project stage, it will come up with different predictive insights that you can see here. But in this presentation, I'm going to focus more on the planning and procurement phase. So imagine on the contractor side, the contractor is trying to submit a tender for a roads project or wastewater plant treatment project or pharmaceutical project. And he's trying to create a schedule, as we said, under uncertainties with different variables. So the way we have the contractor through this AI technology is by objectively and accurately assessing the quality of the schedule that the project team put together, and then provide an overview of the quality of the schedule in terms of what's the quality score of the schedule, what are the predicted outcome and risks within the schedule, but also it will highlight opportunities within the schedule. For example, how to minimize the lead times and minimize contingency, etc. And then it will provide the most likely end date of the project, as well as the different risks to achieve that end date. And then it will deep dive and provide the high-risk activities within the schedule by using our AI which is actually beyond QSRA and Monte Carlo analysis that's currently used in the market. And for those activities, it will build a risk profile and then also a mitigation plan in some extent per activity. On the client side now, the client might be looking for a different value. So imagine you've got a client who have a pipeline of different projects who are at the planning phase, and he has established early stage estimates of the schedule and cost. So this platform will help the client to actually analyze these projects and assess their schedule and cost, again, by predicting the outcome and the risks, but also it can help the client to start prioritizing these projects by combining the predicted outcome and risks with other KPIs. Like, for example, these screens here are from one of our government agencies clients, and they wanted to prioritize the projects based on the predicted time and cost combined with ESG sustainability KPIs that they have provided. And then clients typically work with different contractors and subcontractors. And usually we don't want to make the decision only based on the commercial performance of the project. So that's why we help the contractor with the client, with benchmarking those contractors and scoring them, so they can have an analysis based on the scoring of the contractor that's generated based on the previous performance in terms of time and cost of that contractor, combined with the schedule quality and the cost estimate quality as well. Now, a lot of clients and contractors, once they finish the project, they're supposed to do what we call post-investment review or post-construction review, which a lot of companies fail to do because of the lack of time and resources. So one more thing that we help to do through AI is to streamline this post-investment review by running a retrospective analysis on the project, and then through AI we try to understand what happened in the project and what went wrong. So we generate actually an automated comprehensive report that will summarize the time and cost variances from the initial scope of the project, and then it will identify the scope changes and what are those changes that impacted the milestones of the project. And then also, to some extent, it will explain or understand why things went wrong And most importantly, it will provide an indication of how we can make these things better and the risks and the loss, how they could be avoided in the future. So we are currently taking pilots for our AI technology with both clients and contractors across different sectors. If you are interested to explore a pilot for this AI technology, or you want to have a live demo, or you want to discuss in more details of this technology, please reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Houssem. That was very interesting on AI and the possibilities of AI. Our next speaker is Ryan Forde from ArtDocs, and Ryan is going to be talking about the importance of Project Information Manager. Thank you, Ryan.
Okay. Hello, everyone. How are we? Try to keep this short and sweet. I know what time it is in the day. So my name is Ryan Forde. I'm a BIM coordinator and trainer at ArtDocs, and ArtDocs are they're a BIM consultancy practice here in Dublin that some of you may already know. So the reason I'm, I suppose, giving this talk today was having a conversation with some people on some projects recently, and we were in the conversation of information management and who should basically fulfill the role of information manager. A lot of people don't really understand the role, possibly, and maybe get mixed up as to what exactly the duties and the responsibilities are in that role. So I'm going to kind of shine a light on, you know, project information manager, the duties, responsibilities, and hopefully be able to get some questions and I suppose comments and feedback in a few moments' time after I finish. So first of all, what we'll do is we'll just go, I suppose, right at the start, you know, what essentially is project information, and just understanding that essentially project information and the management role of that is, you know, it's in its title. You're managing information, making sure that information that it gets created properly, it gets shared properly, and it goes to where it's needed to go, and it also goes in the right format as well. Now, all of us in the room here know that at the heart of BIM is data. And if we don't have any data, you know, there's no information. If we don't have any information, there's no knowledge, and so on. What's really important as well, that, and look, a lot of us in this room, we're all coming from different backgrounds. We're all going to have different skills and different talents. We're all going to have different experiences as well. All of our construction projects are the exact same. So there's going to be an awful lot of people an awful lot of hands essentially that's creating information, sharing information, producing it. And there needs to be people there that can verify that information and be able to base, I suppose, all of our ideas. We want to make sure that the integrity of the data is there and that it's correct. We must make sure that the data gets to where it's meant to go as well. So validating information, getting to its delivery point is very, very important. And we need to have someone that's dedicated to that role. And that is part of the information manager role in itself. So I suppose, you know, as I've mentioned, the project information manager, it plays a key role in coordinating and managing information right at the beginning of the project and right towards the end of the project then as well. So moving swiftly on to, I suppose, the function and the flow of information management. I suppose this is a kind of an image taken from one of the ArtDocs training programs, the BIM coordinator program. So a bit of a shameful plug there on some ArtDocs training. But I suppose I like this diagram because it's quite detailed and it breaks down a lot of information quite well. First of all, what I will say is that the project information manager, you know, it's not a role that's going to be, you know, the one role throughout the life cycle of the project. It may be that it's broken down into design stage, construction stage, and then the operation stage as well. So that's really important to point out. Sometimes that can get a little bit misconstrued by people, and maybe they think it's just one person, you know, throughout the whole life cycle. That may not be the case all of the time. You know, contracts and things like that, well, appointments will always come into it. So on this diagram here, if we look down to the bottom of the screen, we can see that we have our BIM authors, and the BIM authors are essentially the people that are going to be producing all of that information. Each one of our companies in each of the, you know, the three stages of the project, design, construction, and operations, these are all going to be producing that information for each company. In each company, we will have a person that's going to be responsible for, I suppose, the task information manager. They're going to be responsible for making sure that that information for that company is verified and it has been checked before it goes to, I suppose, the common data environment or the CDE. Once it does go there for verification, I suppose, this is where the project information manager will come on board, make sure that that information is correct, and make sure it's in the right format. And there's a lot of other quality data checks that will go on as well with that particular kind of review. And what the information manager then will do will share that information. Essentially, it will end up with the person that's titled the client information manager, who will be acting on behalf of the client or the owner. This person will also do their own internal checks. If it's correct, it gets moved along on the process and it goes to the publishing state. If it doesn't, if it's not, they're not happy with it, then that we have to do another internal check. It has to go back, has to be revised, and so on. So what I'm at this diagram, basically, there's an awful lot of reviewing, there's an awful lot of checking all of the data that we're producing. So if you don't have that particular role, we're going to struggle basically. So I'll move on again. So we've talked about, I suppose, a little bit about the breakdown of the role. Let's talk about the activities now as well. And as I've mentioned, there's going to be an awful lot of people that's creating information, sharing it, and so on. So with all of that information, then it needs to be reviewed and it needs to be checked. Now, what's handy is that we do have a kind of a 4-tier process here: plan, do, check, and act. So the planning is quite simple. Who's going to be creating the information? What information is it? Where is it going? What is it essentially? And who is it going to? So who's delivering? Who's going to be the recipient of that information? And are they receiving it in the, I suppose, the correct format, really? So that is the first part. So that's the planning part. The do is quite simple as well. You're basically who is producing the information. You have to you have to create the information. You have to produce it. So there's no more on that. So essentially, it's just doing the information, creating it. The checking is essentially you could guarantee that it's a 3-part process. You're going to have, I suppose, you're going to have your task information manager for each company in each stage of the project. So your design, construction, and operations. In each company, your task information managers will review the information. They're going to make sure that it's correct. They're going to make sure that it's fit for purpose, and that it gets shared to where where it needs to go. You're also going to have then, when it gets to that stage, you're going to have your overall project information manager for that stage. They're going to do similar checks, probably a little bit more thoroughly. And then you're going to have your client information manager checks, and they're going to do a final check to make sure that it gets published out. So that's your checking, and then you're acting upon it as well. So this is the kind of the last stage. So if the information is incorrect, if it's wrong, essentially, it can't go any further along on the process. So it essentially gets rejected. So it goes back a particular step, and the person who creates it gets acknowledges where the changes are, and hopefully it gets resolved and it moves on the process. But I suppose this is quite a rigorous check for just getting information from point A to point B. But there is a reason for it. We can't have information traveling from point A to point B that hasn't been checked, or if it's incorrect and so on. It's essentially, to avoid cost delays, make sure everything, I suppose, sticks to the main objective and the procedures and protocols. These checks are, to cause problems or to cause delays, essentially, is to make everyone's lives, I suppose, a little bit easier, really. Okay, so nobody wants information that's incorrect going all over the CDE, the common data environment, and going to the wrong people or the wrong information and so on. Okay. So moving along then, and really understanding the need for a project information manager. So as I said at the start, I had a couple of kind of conversations that came up there the other day in some meetings, and that was one of the questions. Very, very simple question. Do we really need an information manager? There are several documents that suggest that we do. One, for example, would be the CIC BIM protocol. And they suggest that we do need an information manager, and possibly that the appointing party should be the team that are essentially appointing another team in that role to undertake the management of information. So as part of the role, it has been often regarded as the BIM police, right, really. So people that are essentially the gatekeeper for managing the information and managing the processes and protocols and so on. And I suppose within this role as well, there's kind of 4 key elements. You have people, processes, technologies, and you have data. And the project information manager will be basically catering towards all of those elements, making sure that people know exactly what they're meant to be doing and how they're meant to do it. we are using the correct processes and the correct protocols, and then that we're also using the correct technology, and hopefully that will lead us to correct informed data and information. Okay, so as I said, the information manager role will be at the center of all this. Okay, so understanding the need of a project information manager. Do we need one? The simple answer is yes, yes we do. So we've talked about, do we need one? Yes or no? Yes is the answer. What are some of the duties and the responsibilities of that information manager then? I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of the key ones that I will point out: making sure that the CDE has been set up properly. Okay, making sure that the protocols for that CDE, the processes, the right people are invited to it, they know exactly how to use it, so on and so forth. So the CDE is massive, as it's going to be our single source of truth for all the information for that particular stage of the project. Okay. We also want to make sure that we are validating the information and we're checking for incompliance, but we're also checking for compliance then as well. We're making sure that the deliverables in the exchange information requirements are being met, and people know how to fulfill those requirements then as well. One of the other things that I will say as well, which is probably the key one there on that list, and it's towards the end of the list, but it's liaising with the project members and the employer in support of a collaborative working culture. We must make sure that people aren't working in silos anymore. We need to make sure that we have on our team and on the wider team that we have a collaborative, coordinated, and basically making sure that every team is working together to reach the main objective of the overall project. So I've touched on some of the duties anyway. I'm going to touch on some of the unwritten duties of the role of information manager. There's 4 key ones here that I've pointed out just from my own experiences and from my colleagues' experiences as well. So people management, being fair but firm, facilitating collaboration, and also continuous learning. So look, I've talked about managing information. With managing information, there's people basically create that information. So we also need to be very good people, people person, or have great people skills and be able to manage people basically. It's not to bully people, it's not push them down a road that they don't necessarily want to go, or maybe they don't necessarily understand. But we must make sure that we have great management skills, and that is absolutely key, because if you don't generally get on with people, you're going to struggle. Okay. You also want to be fair but firm. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of people in this room now and understand digital construction. They understand a lot of the processes of building information modelling and how it should be run on a project. There's going to be a lot of people on our teams that don't necessarily have that knowledge or have that skill as of yet. So it's making sure that they understand why we're doing things a certain way, for them not to get necessarily frustrated or you get frustrated. But making sure that they can understand what they're doing and why we're doing it, basically, to reach our overarching aim on the project. You also need to be firm with them as well, not necessarily let things slip and slide and so on. Okay, facilitating collaboration. This is an absolutely key one. You must make sure that all the teams are working together, making sure that they can work together in certain software applications. Again, this will come into, if certain teams are struggling with softwares, you need to be able to go back and possibly take people aside, upskill them, train them if required, and make sure then they can go back into that collaborative working culture, basically. So being a facilitator for collaboration is an essential duty and an essential responsibility of being an information manager. And I suppose the last one there is continuous learning. So we're all here today, we're all listening to each other. There's been some speakers, fantastic speakers actually, and I know I've learned an awful lot today and over the past 2 days as well with the online. I'm sure you guys will agree with that, but we should be constantly improving our professional development, querying things, questioning things. Am I doing certain things in the correct procedures? Is there a more efficient and streamlined way I could go about my job and maybe other people's jobs then as well? We're in the age of digital transformation, and there's constantly new applications, softwares, plugins, add-ins, and there's new things that are getting developed at an absolutely rapid pace. It's about being aware of that. It's taking that on board and accepting it first of all, and just reassuring that reassuring that yourself you can't remain stagnant. Okay, you have to be constantly developing and evolving as we move along with the times. So continuous learning, I think, is very, very important. for your own self personally, but then for your teammates and your colleagues on the project teams then as well, being able to bring that forward. So you shouldn't be, well, personally I believe that the way that we do certain things nowadays, you need to be able to streamline that process in the next 5 years perhaps. You don't want to be, if we look at today, 5 years time for today, I don't want to be looking back and saying I'm doing this project the same way I would have done it 5 years ago. Hopefully I will have found out there would have been better software applications and processes and protocols that I can basically streamline my processes and my ways of thinking and so on. So I was thinking this image might throw a bit of controversy there. I am an actual Chelsea fan, a football fan. There's probably Liverpool and United supporters in the room, maybe Arsenal supporters as well. But I suppose the reason I have this image up here, and it really relates to, I'm not saying he's a great information manager, he probably would be actually, but I suppose if we relate this analogy to being a football manager, technical competency and management competency, okay? Having a technical competency and being fantastic and knowledgeable about BIM doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to have a good management competency, okay? I suppose relating this to Jose Mourinho there, the Chelsea manager, look, he wouldn't have been a fantastic footballer, in his playing days, but at his 2 stints at Chelsea there, he was a fairly decent manager. Probably a controversial one there as well, but he was a good manager, he was a good man manager, and I think that relates back into that information management role as well. Now, as a manager, if we talk about football for a minute, he needs to be able to trust these players, he needs to be able to trust his team that are collecting data against other teams and other players as well. So he needs to be able to rely on that data. He needs to be able to manage that data as well. So there's a similar role there, in that information management process on construction projects. So he needs to be able to tell people where they need to go, when they need to go, how they need to do this, and basically manage a full team. And the overall objective there is to consistently win football matches. So if we're talking about technical competency here, in the analogy of football, technical competency will be able to play football. Management competency will be able to, I suppose, collate a consistently winning team, for example. Okay? So that's my little analogy there on football. And then the last thing there that I'm going to talk about is just on, who should really, what kind of team or what people should be, managing this role. Should it be an internal appointment? Should it be an external appointment? Should there be BIM consultants involved? And again, this is at the different stage of a project, so design, construction, and the operation stage. Now, who should fulfill the role? That's a question that's going to throw up some questions possibly for debate. Personally, working as behalf of a BIM consultancy practice, I'm going to be a little bit biased, and I'm going to say that maybe a BIM consultant should be the person to fulfill the role, possibly because that if it's an internal appointment, people already have their existing roles, and if that internal appointment then happens, the project information manager role will possibly be a secondary role. So that, if it's a lead consultant or a lead designer, that's probably going to be their main role. And we can't have information management fall back into a secondary role. So that's where risks are going to happen, and we need to be able to manage risks as well. So we possibly need a full role, a full team that are just dedicated to managing project information management. And that's why I'm going to be a little bit biased and say a BIM consultant maybe should come in there. But I'm happy to have a debate over that, or if there's any questions and comments on that particular little statement there as well. So some of you may know ArcDocs. As I mentioned in the past, look, we've provided production consultancy support and training to the construction industry for many years now. These are a couple of, they're not all of the projects, but they're just a small selection there of some projects, I suppose recently, that we've been involved in with fulfilling the role of project information manager, either on the design, construction, or the operation stage, and working with different teams and so on as well. So look, again, as I said, happy to take on any questions or any comments or queries in relation to anything that I discussed. And yeah, that's my time, guys. So thank you very much for listening to me. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It was great to have the role of the project manager explained, because the information manager explained, because sometimes there's some confusion over it, and it's also important to realise what they do, and people are often confused about that. So that was very good presentation. Our last speaker of the evening is Robert Moore, and Robert is project lead with Built Digital project, and he's going to explain how the Built Digital project will make a difference.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Robert.
Hi, I just want to talk about Build Digital Project and how it's going to make a difference. So what I tried to do was, since Build Digital Project has only started, I tried to look at what questions that you will have and you'll be asking about the Build Digital Project and trying to give you an understanding of it and help you out on that. So just to start off a little bit about myself, I'm Robert Moore and I'm the project lead. I've been there since February this year, but before that I've worked in the AEC industry for a number of years and I've came from the client side in Grange Government Development Agency. I've also got first class honours in information, in construction informatics, and I've published a number of papers, including one about the digital transformation roadmap. And I've also worked on co-authoring the ISO technical report about implementation of an EIR and a BEP. So why is the Build Digital Project important? So what we are about is we're about improving the construction sector for Project Ireland 2040. This is a major project that's going to happen in the Irish industry about developing infrastructure we all need to use as citizens. So it's about getting good value for money and improving the industry to make sure we get that good value for money. Also in part of that is housing for all. So we're involved with helping housing for all to make sure we get that infrastructure we need and enabling modern methods of construction as well. Also as well that we need to be thinking about is about sustainability, and it's about making sure that we're working sustainable in the construction industry. So I just wanted to kind of have a look at Newgrange. I suppose Newgrange was a construction project in Ireland. It was one of the first construction projects ahead of the pyramids or Stonehenge. So Ireland has a really long construction history or tradition within what we do in Ireland, and we're also world leaders in it as well. So I suppose that's kind of a thing, that the construction industry is so old that it doesn't change very quickly. And what we have to do is now we have to look at the new computer industry and how the computer industry is so new and is changing so rapidly, and how do we manage with that? But I suppose just before I go on, what do the two things have in common? I wonder, does anybody hazard a guess of what the two things has in common? Mary, would you like to put your thought?
I'll pass on that, Robert.
Okay, both of them were made in Ireland. So we have the skills within Ireland, and especially within Ireland now, there's a very much a culture around computer skills and technology. And if we can combine that with our construction skills that we already have, we will have a great industry, and we should be looking for that to have a great international industry, as Ross was talking about earlier, about Irish people working abroad. So I think we can do that. And I suppose just looking at the problems that we're working to solve, I suppose we want to solve productivity. We need to make sure that the construction industry is has better productivity. And we also need to be looking at using less resources. Less resources as material and less resources as in hours and labour that people work on. We also need to drive speed within it. We need to increase speed of our construction and then improve quality. So we need to be looking at these elements. And what we need to do is we need to uplift digital technology, or the uptake of digital technology within the construction industry to get these improvements. And I suppose the way that we're kind of looking at doing it is we're trying to support the bottom up by giving them materials to help them make their jobs easier. And what we want to do within Build Digital is also provide evidence for the management to show that using digital technologies will improve. Really what we want to do is we want to make a win-win culture. We don't want to have it that the client or somebody is driving down, making the supply chain drive down the prices or anything like that. We want to make sure it's win-win. So just to move on to the challenges that we want to overcome, I suppose really one of them is fear of change, is looking at that fear of change and how do we get across the fear of change and the low productivity of our projects. And our assets as well, that we make sure that we get the more productivity of our assets, and the lack of information and materials to support this change and help it. So there's the kind of challenges we want to look at overcoming. And then just to talk about the structure of what Build Digital project is, to just give you a quick overview of it. So Build Digital project is made up of 8 pillars, and each of these pillars will be investigating certain areas. So I suppose we've got a cultural change pillar. We'll be looking at that digital transformation. And what that pillar needs to do is we need to produce some toolkits and supports to help these good practices become common. And also we have a standardization pillar, which will look at common languages and common rules within the construction to reduce costs, reworks and distributes. We have an educational pillar that is the gel between all the pillars, that is kind of get the materials there that we can help educate people about life cycle and design and managing the environment. And then also, as well as that, is the digital procurement pillar, which is to look at better procurement for sustainable digital procurement, so we can get a more sustainable built environment for. And then sustainability itself, we're looking at sustainability and climate action. And what we want to do is produce toolkits to help people to design out waste and to reduce landfill and other things. So what we want to do is we want to engage with people in these pillars. So we have a number of ways that people can engage with the pillars. We have a leadership forum, which has around 50 people from the industry involved across the pillars to engage with the industry. We also will have an annual survey that should be coming out in the next few weeks. And we'll have a half-yearly event. So at our annual conference, we'll be announcing what our half-year event will look like early next year. And then we will have an annual conference later on this year as well. We'll be doing living labs, which will be reaching out to projects, to companies about projects that they have that would like to share some of their good practices with us. And then we'll have workshops across as well, across all regions, and we'll have regional activities. And then we're going to be launching a Build Digital Exchange Hub, which will be a website which will be to disseminate all the materials and allow you to engage with us further. And then also, you can also engage with us through social media. The materials that we'd be liking to have in the Digital Exchange Hub will be toolkits. We're looking at how we can make toolkits to improve the industry. We want guidelines about how we should be working and how you should be using standards, recommendations and templates, and also case studies and training material and also reports. So we're trying to give you materials there that make implementing digital much easier. So Build Digital is about bringing people. So I won't just talk about the people that's in it. And I think it's very important that we need to work with people, because people solve problems. People will drive that change. And also people help people. And people will deliver the Build Digital project. So just to look at what we have is we've got a forum that I talked about earlier that have around 50 members from around the industry. We got representations from the representative bodies, and we've other people in it. So just to give an idea of the diversity of that, and it's very important that we have a diverse membership of our forum to make sure that we understand what is the needs of the industry. And then to talk about the project itself is based around a number of partners that have came together that won grant funding. I suppose TU Dublin, CitA, Atlantic Technological University, Munster Technological University, UCD, and Southeastern Technological University are the partners within the project. And then our team itself, I suppose our leadership team is myself, and then there's Pat Lucy as our industry lead, and then we have our project director, which is Avril Bean, and then we have Suzanne Purcell, which is our PMO lead. As well as that, we have a number of project co-chairs, and these are all the co-chairs that talk about the pillars that I had earlier, that manage the pillars that I have earlier. And also, as well as that, we're part of the CSG, so we form part of the CSG as Action Area 7. So we have that structure within the government for what we're doing, and that's leading up into the CSG, the Construction Sector Group. And I suppose how will Build Digital help people? So I'm kind of trying to look at what we want to do is what really, I think we understand that actually most of the solutions is out there with the industry itself, that people have created tools, techniques, or methodologies to actually help what they do within their business. They make these tools, techniques, and processes to solve problems that they have in their companies and running projects. So really what we want to do is we want to try and gather them all up and standardize them and make them available to the whole industry. So I think it's important that we realize that we can help ourselves, and everybody does have some good practices that we'd like to share. So I suppose I wanted to talk about this. I'm considered a good cook in my house. I always do the Christmas turkey, and I also do anything that's happening. And the reason for that is not I'm a great cook. I use a good tool. I use a good tool to know when what I'm cooking is cooked correctly, and I don't have to worry about other things. And it means that it's much easier to understand what's going when you have a tool that you're able to get data on it for when something is ready. So what we want to do is we want to get tools like this for the construction industry to help what we do to make sure that we get better outcomes. So I suppose, what does this material look like? So I'm just going to use an example of some of the work I did when I was working in the Grange Government Development Agency. This is an Excel sheet that we developed and that we use within it. And it's not just a simple Excel sheet. There was a lot of intelligence within that Excel sheet that allowed us to do several things. So I suppose that area there where we have the hyperlinks there, they were concatenated formulas that we then run macros on. So by using that Excel sheet, we actually could check uploads in minutes of thousands of drawings and find out if the drawing had been uploaded and if the drawing had been named correctly. So it was a simple tool, and sometimes we have to look at what simple tools are to make sure that we get them results, and sometimes it's not a complicated thing that we need. So we're going to try and see what other things that the industry have, other tools and techniques they have, and try and bring that out. So just to finish off, this was one of the things that I noticed on the grant call. It talked about practice and theory and making sure that there was a strong focus on practical adoption. And I think really that I'd like to say that I believe the Build Digital project has the right structures in place to deliver a practical approach based on best international theory and Irish industry experience. Just to finish off, I'd like, this is a QR code to our newsletter, so if anybody would like to take that, so we can start engaging with you. It would be great if we had, if you can start engaging us through the newsletter, and then that's me. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Robert. That was very, very good. Thank you, Robert, for the whistle-stop tour of Built Digital Project. I'd like to thank all our speakers for this afternoon session. We had 6 very, very good speakers. We've had Donal, Daly, Matthew Egan. We've had Andrew Bellerby, Dr. Houssem, Jerbi, Ryan Forde, and Robert Moore for very, very good presentations. And I'd like to ask Donal, Matthew, Dr. Houssem, Jerbi, Ryan Forde and Robert Moore, if they could come up for a 5-minute question and answer session. Now, Matthew will be on virtual. You should be virtually there, hopefully, for just some very quick questions.
Yes.
5 minutes.
I'm there.
Thank you, Matthew. I'd like to put the questions to the floor. Is there any questions? There must be some questions. There's been really interesting stuff out there. Thank you, John.
I'm just interested, how long have you been working on the
Sorry,
AI
you want to come here?
apps that you're applying to the project data? I mean, how long have you spent collecting the data on which you've built the applications?
Almost 5 years now, since December 2017.
And I mean, have you been able to, without too much trouble, get a good diversity of projects where people?
No, that's a little bit challenging, because our first project, we were very lucky to work with a government agency, and they had very good amount of data, that was sufficient for us to build the technology. But since then, most of the clients we've been working on, they kept the same decision to not let us combine their data with other clients. So when we go and work with a client, we will only use their data to implement our AI technology to advise them. Plus, we do add some external data like weather, economics, etc.
Yes. Yes.
So it's challenging to build kind of a market intelligence database where we can bring together data from different clients. This is not possible.
I mean, I'm going to leave it at that, Houssem. I mean, I'm well aware from my own background, like the importance, the people who end up with the best answers are the ones who have most access to data, if they use that data correctly.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions?
I'm trying to think who to pose this question to, but it's about the gap between, when we talk about data, but for most people, when we talk about a digital delivery on a project, in most people's minds, that's a bunch of PDFs in a set of folders, which, I mean, you could say that the PDFs are digital files, but actually it's not data. It's not data that can be analyzed or where analysis can be performed on it or queries can be performed. So it's about bridging the gap between what most people in this industry think about as data at the moment, which is a digital safety file, which is a set of PDFs, and everything that people have been talking about today, and Siemens and yourself, Donal, and the sort of AI and analytics. How do we, that's a massive gap to bridge. Any thoughts? Maybe Donal, as somebody who's outside this industry, you might have some thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. It's a tough question, and the data one has been forever the tough question. I think it's spending the appropriate time to figure out what are the key data pieces that you actually want to measure, and most of the time, if we look at the haystack of data that's there, there's probably a couple of points that we should be looking for, which I think the design at the outset of the data model and the data structure that surfaces up the key points, I think is the first thing to do. And then the second thing, I think, I know in the world that I'm in, I'm more interested in trends than I am in accuracy, if you know what I mean. So if I'm heading the right direction, that's a good thing. So if I can get directionally accurate data, that gives me insight. I'm not overly concerned about the absolute accuracy. So I'd be trying to find what are the key insights I'm looking for, what's the data that drives that, and can I not worry too much about the absolute accuracy about everything.
Hello. I have a question there for the, I think it's Matthew in the Modularize company. The two Modularize companies mentioned today that early engagement is very important to get your input in to the design to reduce the cost, and cost is obviously important to our company in Linesight. Do you get early engagement with your designs, which would be a far higher level of detail, get to submit that to the design team and integrate your design at that very early RIB 0 stage, or even the very early concept design, where you could feed in a very complicated model with a lot of data that would be very valuable at an early stage?
That's probably a question for you, Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So one of the points I was trying to make in my presentation is I don't think we're there yet. So and I don't think that's going to come until we've got standardization. So there's so much difference even across very similar types of offsite manufacturers. You know, the steel frame modular sector is really, there's a lot of variance in all of their products. So until we can get some standardization and we can kind of drive that at the front end, I don't think we're really going to start to see the benefits of that. So, for example, if you could standardize the steel frame or various elements around the steel frame, you could apply that early on in the project. You could do things like, you know, design automation for various different generations of that module. and then you could kind of condense the procurement lead time in terms of steel work, because it'd be standardized, it'd be done up front, it'd be a click of a button. But I don't think we're there yet, but we're certainly on the road to being able to do that.
We have time for one more question before we close out. Is there anybody with another question?
Hi, Sarah from Walls Construction. I have a question for Ryan. You mentioned the project information manager. Your suggestion would be that it would be a consultant rather than having it in-house for the contractor. Do you not think that poses an opportunity for a new role to be developed within the contractor rather than as a secondary role you referred to?
Possibly, yeah. I think the key thing here is to have, a designated point of contact for that particular role. That it's not a secondary role that somebody has picked up. That's why I mentioned the thing about the lead designer there, that might, the project information manager role may be their secondary role. You need to have somebody that's their only particular job at that, managing information, making sure that it gets checked and verified. So possibly, yeah, to your question, but again, that I think that BIM consultancy in-house or third party, I think that's always going to be a question for debate. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks very much. We are on time, so I'll hand you over to Alan, who will close out.
Well, did you enjoy today? That's great. I'm just back from a retirement too. I think I'm probably next in line in the school, but two of my colleagues retired, so I'll double back there. So, what can I say? Thank you so much for today. Heartiest congratulations to all our presenters and to our chairs, Eamon, Mary and John. To our sponsors, Arup, Dytex, John Sisk & Son, ProCAD and Celebri. And to our gold sponsors, Current BIM Management, SIS, Cosmos and Invercara. We wouldn't be able to put this together, I keep saying this, without your assistance. And it was also great to have such a great media partner as Irish Building. The guys have been busily tweeting and connecting in LinkedIn over the last few days. So thanks to the guys in Irish Building and Colin and his team. It's interesting. I've just come from a meeting of our School of Surveying and Construction Innovation. Actually, it's a new school title, and they were talking about the perfect storm that is COVID, Brexit, the war in the East. In our context, they were talking about, I suppose, COVID and online learning and organizational design. But I suppose the same message is that we have missed the connectivity with you people in joining us today. So, I read a number of articles in the Financial Times each week. There's some very good articles about COVID and the impact on business. And they talk about COVID, breaking bonds and, weakening institutions. But I was heartened today by the turnout, 100 plus, 120 plus delegates here today. And I think it's given, I suppose, it's been uplifting, I suppose, for us in CitA and the guys in the background. I see Elenia there and Suzanne and Ellen and Sam, all the ladies, great team to work with. But I think this has given us a renewed focus. The Construction IT Alliance are also delighted to be involved with the Build Digital project, which is the most significant investment by the Irish state in, I suppose, construction innovation and digital adoption, alongside the other 6 pillars of the CSG plan. And it's great that, Robert, you were with us today. Sorry I missed your presentation, but it's really fantastic to have this. We had, this is our 3rd day. I think what worked about for this event was that we had a good mix. The 2 days online, there is a place for online. The idea that you have short precise presentations at lunchtime. People can get back to work. There's definitely a place for that. And that worked well on Wednesday and Thursday, and we got a lot of compliments for that. But there's also a place for in-person. And I think, if you use even the analogy of a college, there's a space for online learning, but there's also an importance to have that one-to-one interaction with your students. And that's been, there's an acronym going around at the moment, CBA. I couldn't be arsed to turn on the laptop or go to the lecture. Well, you were today. You came along. And so we will continue an element of online. So like this year, we did the digital housing series with Enterprise Ireland. And we will continue the tech trend series. And we can continue doing those well online. But we will have a significant event each year. The BIM Gathering will be with us next year. We see Build Digital making CitA stronger. We see CitA making Build Digital stronger. We see very much a partnership approach. And so I'm going to stop at that point and just say how much I enjoyed today, even though I got a lot of slagging over my leatherware today, my shoes. I bought these in Rome in, when was it? October 19, when we were with the students in Rome. And we had shoe trees in the shoes. We had them in a bag, in a box, in another bag. They never came out. Well, they came out today. And I was delighted to don them for the first time. So thank you so much. We're having, I think, a drinks reception. And yeah. So the next event for the Alliance is the 30th of June. We're doing our final event before the summer. Yes, we're talking about off-site construction again, but it's an important one. And then we're going to take a well-deserved break. So thank you so much. Sorry I missed the afternoon session. I believe it went very well. I'll hear more about it. And to all our sponsors, come back to us next year, and we'll, it's going to, I think the future is bright for the country, for the industry, for the Alliance. Thank you so much. Thank you.